Hey friends, and welcome back to another pottery template tutorial. Today we are making this super cute sugar bowl. So first I want you to cut out all the templates, and you're going to have to tape together the two sides of SB2 because that piece was just too long enough to put on a piece of paper. Okay, once you have that taped together, now go ahead and roll out a 1/2 centimeter slab. We're going to use this slab for most of our templates, with the one exception of the spoon template. That one we're going to make a little bit thicker. So go ahead and cut them out, and you can set the pieces aside for now. Now we're going to use our scraps to roll out a 1 centimeter template. This piece doesn't need to be very big. We're just going to be using it to roll out the spoon. So that's SB6, which is the sugar bowl spoon. And you can make this thinner if you want. You can cut this out with 1/2 centimeter slab too if you want, but I personally like to make my spoon a little bit thicker just because then it doesn't feel quite as delicate when I'm using it. Okay, we're gonna pop those in front of the fan for a few minutes so they're not so floppy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start assembling the sides. So Bianca is starting here with SB2, and you want to cut each end at a 45-degree angle. If you have this angle cutter tool, that's really great, but you can also just use a knife, and you want to slip and score those two sides together. Once it's nice and well attached, you want to move on to the other part, which is SB1. So we're going to assemble these two sides, and then we're going to put them together. Okay, now it's time to put these two sides together. Now, I would say this is the trickiest part of this template because it is always hard to put together two angle joints that are kind of like butted up against each other. But just take it slow, and if you find that your piece is starting to collapse, I would recommend putting it back in front of the fan for a few minutes, or just setting it aside if you don't have a fan. They should be well dry enough now to hold their own weight so that you can work on that seam and smooth it in. Now Bianca's using her finger here. I also really like to use a rib to kind of smooth those in together. And if you're not feeling too confident with that seam, you can always add a coil along the inside to reinforce that seam. Okay, now it's time to add the bottom, and please make sure you're grabbing the right circle here because they're slightly different sizes. So you want to be grabbing the SB4 sugar bowl base circle, not the lid. You want to go ahead and mark where you need to score and score both sides. So you'll notice that the base is a little bit bigger than it needs to be. All my templates are like this. This is so that you can attach first and then trim. This way you get the cleanest cut. Once you stick them together, give it a few taps or drop it on the table lightly, just to make sure it's really nicely attached together. And once it's well attached, go ahead and trim off the excess and smoothen the base. You can also use a slightly wet paintbrush on the inside to smooth out any extra scoring lines. Okay, now it's time to work on the lid. So we're going to start with the flange. So as you're working with and smoothing out the flange, it's possible that it can get a little stretched out. So just as you're attaching the two ends of it together, please double check that it's fitting inside of the opening of your sugar bowl. You want it sitting just inside of the opening with, a millimeter or two of a gap. And you might need to adjust the length if you are butting up the ends against each other like Bianca's doing here, versus if you are cutting them at a 45-degree angle and overlapping them. So just before you attach the flange together, just verify that it's going to fit inside your sugar bowl opening. Once you know it fits, go ahead and attach it to the lid of your sugar bowl. Try and center this as much as possible. It's a little tricky because everything's a little wonky when you're hand building, but do your best and I'm sure it will be just fine. And a sponge on a stick is a really helpful tool in this scenario. Big recommend. Bianca actually turned me on to sponges on a stick. Okay, now we're going to work on the lid handle. So you just want to bend this little piece here. Please, because it's so small, be aware that it might crack as you're bending it, depending on how dry it is. So just watch that as you're bending it, and you can always use your finger to smooth it out again. And then you want to slip and score both sides where it's going to go and just attach it. Okay, moving on to our spoon. So our spoon, basically all you want to do is smooth out the edges and then kind of manipulate it with your hands to get it into that spoon shape. So just like Bianca's doing here, you can use your thumb or your finger to kind of get that shape to be curved a little bit. This is going to hold the sugar a lot better. All right, we're in the final stretch here. We are going to use the sugar bowl hole guide. Now, this is totally optional, but if you want to cut out a slot for your spoon to stick in, I definitely recommend using this hole guide. So you can use that template to trace through a hole onto your sugar bowl. This will be the perfect size for a 1 centimeter thick spoon to fit in, and then just cut off that piece. And as you can see here, you also need to cut through the flange as well. It's a little tricky to keep things nice and tidy here, but just do the best that you can, and you can always use a sponge on a stick to smooth it out. Okay, now we're done with our sugar bowl, so now we're just going to set it aside to dry. Once it's bone dry, you can pop it in the kiln for the bisque fire. It's looking so cute. Pick your favorite glaze. We're using a simple white here. And then wipe off the bottoms as needed. So I do recommend firing everything separately. So you're going to need to wipe the base of the sugar bowl, the base of the lid, so the part of the lid that will be touching the kiln shelf. And then depending on how you want to fire your spoon, you either need to remove some glaze for kiln stilts like Bianca is doing here, or you can remove all of the glaze on the bottom if you don't have kiln stilts, whatever you prefer. As long as you're using a stoneware clay or another vitrified clay, it will be perfectly food safe, even unglazed. All right, our sugar bowl is completed, and I'm so obsessed with this design. I think it looks so cute. I love the squat little shape that it has. I think that it will look so nice on any table or any tea set. In your kitchen, anywhere, this little cutie will look so adorable, and you can even use it for a jar if you want to. So I hope that you enjoyed this template tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed the template. As always, the template will be linked down below in the video description, and I'll see you in a month with the next template. Bye, friends.